Hi, so welcome to my reading wrap up for the month of April. Um, in April, I read 11 books, which is a bit better than the previous month where I didn't even read ten books. And yeah, I did read some like novellas here and there, but overall, it was a pretty decent reading month. So first, I want to talk a bit about a book that I read that is quite different from the other books that I read. Uh, it's not actually in English. It's The Details by Ia Genberg, or since I read it in the original Swedish, it's Detaljerna by Ia Genberg. So I read this book because it was nominated for the International Booker Prize, and I happen to need a short Swedish book to read just because I haven't read any in literally like almost a year now. So I thought a short Swedish book would be good to make me start reading Swedish books again. And so I I read this and I liked it. I It took me a while to finish, even though it was just like 100 pages. Part of it is because the language is quite fancy, slightly above my level, so I had to use Kindle's translation feature quite a bit, but it was worth it. It was a beautifully told story. Like the premise isn't anything crazy, so it's the average like literary fiction premise. The main character has I think it's malaria or like some sort of fever, and so she starts to reminisce about her past and especially about the four people that shaped her life, her past the most, and basically going through all of them and yeah, just going through her past. And what I find fascinating is the characterization, because each of those four people changed in the main character in some very significant ways, and we see those changes not just in their own chapters, but in the other chapters as well. So the all those four side characters made long-lasting impacts on the character, on the main character, and it was so good. Like, yeah, it's slow. Not a lot of things happen, but that's just literary fiction for you. So yeah, I like that. And then the second book that is kind of different. It's also kind of literary fiction, but it's marketed as post apocalyptic fiction, which it technically is, but it's more like a it's really more like a literary fiction book that just happens to be set in the future. And the book is The Annual Migration of Clouds by Premee Mohamed. I definitely didn't read this just because of the author's name is kind of similar to mine. But yeah, this is a post-apocalyptic. This is set in post-apocalyptic. I think it's Alberta. It's somewhere in Canada, where the main character is a girl who lives in this like little community where people basically help each other, and more. I mean, more so than in our actual reality. I guess it's like a really tight knit group, and she receives this invitation, or not invitation, like an acceptance letter for a college that is far away, basically like the last remnant of the pre-collapse civilization. And she really wants to go there, but she is sick. She has this like parasite fungi thing called the CAD, which can like control her mind a little bit in like a weird way. And her mother also has that, and she can't be left alone because of that. And not to mention that her community around her relies on her to do her job in order for the community to work. And so she's really conflicted about whether she should go or not. And yeah, I mean, it's a literary fiction story because it hinges on the idea of whether the girl should accept the invitation or not, or the acceptance, I guess, whether she should go to the college or not. And in like a more traditional post-apocalyptic novel, the girl would just go, and we see what happens in the rest of the world and in that part of the world where maybe the collapse isn't as much like in the college. But here, the focus is not on that. The focus is on the girl trying to decide whether she actually wants to go or not. And the focus is on her relationships with the other characters, especially her mom and her best friend. and some of the other like her other neighbors, and it's such a character centric story, and I admit it feels a bit incomplete because it's a short book, and um, it's also one of those books that just ended, like a lot of literary fiction book. It just ended like seemingly arbitrarily. I mean, this is maybe not really arbitrarily, but it feels like a first half of a story. It feels like it shouldn't end there. And well, there's a sequel coming out soon, so yeah, there's that, I guess. But I still like it overall. And the final novella that I read was this is kind of famous, but not really. It's A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck. So this is about a Mormon guy who dies and then ends up in hell. But the hell he knows is, I mean, the hell he sees is not the hell that he thought he would see. It's not the Mormon hell. It's the Zoroastrian hell, and then he just like some devil basically put him in another hell where the hell is basically Borges's like what's it called, the Library of Babel, yeah, where there are an infinite amount of books. Well, not infinite, but might as well be. It's basically it contains every single book that could ever be written. So there are a lot of books, and the library is huge. And the only way you can get out is by finding a book filled by your entire life story. But it's not easy, obviously. Like there are so many books, and so basically the narrator stays that for a very very long time, unlike what the title suggests. And yeah, it's a fascinating book. I like it overall, but I feel like it's one of those novellas that could have been longer just because the concept itself is so interesting, and the character. I feel like a lot of the side characters just appear and then disappear, even though they're really interesting. We don't really get to see much of them, which is a shame. Some of them are more interesting than the actual main character. So yeah, I still like it, but I wish it was maybe a full-on novel. But yeah, what's next? Next, we have a novel. It's an urban fantasy novel. It's N.K. Jemisin's The City We Became, which tells the story of like the personalization. Is that a word? Yeah, the embodiment of the four. Is it four? Yeah, four boroughs of New York. Is it four or five? I don't remember. Yeah, it's one of those. Basically, the boroughs of New York become like represented by a person from there, and there's this like Lovecraftian villain who's trying to destroy the town for whatever reason, and so like the boroughs must like set aside their differences and work together in order to save the city. And so this is I like this book in general, but I think there are some issues that made me really enjoy it less than it would have been without those issues. For one thing, I think the villain, the antagonist, whatever, is really badly done. She is supposed to be like this Lovecraftian figure, but she's too human to be like Lovecraftian, and yet she's too shallow to be compelling, like to be a compelling human character. So she's in the center of like Lovecraftian, and then human. She's at the awkward center where it doesn't create for a good villain nor a good character. So yeah, I didn't really buy the villain, even though like the other main, like the actual main characters are really compellingly done, compellingly written, and they're really diverse in their own ways. And yeah, it's just the villain is makes me wanna not read the book whenever the villain like appears. So yeah, and then another issue, well, not really issue that I have is it's kind of confusing sometimes. Like the mechanics of what the villain does is not clearly explained, and so the important moments loses some impacts. Like it didn't feel that impactful because I don't really know what's actually going on, if that makes sense. And finally, it can get a bit preachy, but I mean it's a Jemisin book. Like what else do you expect? So yeah, I still like it, but not as much as I thought I would. Maybe, I don't know. Um, Next we have, ooh, yeah. Speaking of Lovecraftian, I read Ruthanna Emrys's Wintertide, which is like a sequel to Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth, or Shadow in like the Innsmouth story. I don't remember the title. I've read that Innsmouth story like way back when I first discovered Lovecraft. I don't remember anything about it, but you don't really have to in order to enjoy Wintertide. It's about the story of someone from Innsmouth who basically had like the government like ruin her life. Okay, so in the original like Innsmouth story, the people from Innsmouth are considered like the other. They're considered uh like bad basically. Here it's the one of them is the main character. So it's an interesting like perspective shift, like if you compare it to the original story, which again I haven't read in a while, but I still remember a bit. And it's basically trying to like tell a story that Lovecraft himself would never tell because he was kind of xenophobic and stuff. But it uses that like a foundation that Lovecraft built. Oh my God, what's this? Anyways, yeah, it uses that foundation that Lovecraft built, that rich mythology, in order to tell a story that Lovecraft himself would probably never have written, never write. Yeah, I don't know. Um, it's good. I like it, and I'm gonna read the sequel. I think it's better than the other Ruthanna Emrys book that I read, which was like a solar punk book. I didn't really like that one all that much. You can see that in the previous video, I guess. But yeah, uh, next I did read another Lovecraftian, maybe not Lovecraftian, but it is cosmic horror, and it is The Outside by Ada Hoffmann. So this one is sci-fi, no, it's space opera, cosmic horror about this scientist, like autistic scientist who basically stumbled upon something really bad, and she did something wrong and killed a lot of people, and then she basically has to like deal with that, along with dealing with some cosmic horror stuff that she unleashed because of that. Okay, that's not a good description. You know what? Forget about it. It's basically a really good like cosmic horror space opera story that I feel like we need to see more of. Like space opera and cosmic horror should be something that should be things that work together really well, but for some reason I don't think I've seen a lot of it. At least not enough. Um, yeah, it was really good. Again, I'm gonna try to read the sequel sometime in the near future because I really like this book. What's next? Oh yeah, this is the my least favorite book of this month, maybe, or of last month, and it's Blindsight by Peter Watts. So this was a bit of a disappointment. Which it's not really the book's fault. I just don't like idea centric like hard sci-fi. I should have known it before I read this book, but I didn't. So this book basically is about an alien invasion story, kind of, but about okay, it's hard to describe what it is about. There are vampires in it. There are like it's a lot about it deals a lot about consciousness, and the stuff about consciousness, they're all really interesting, but I feel like I would have been better off if I just read some nonfiction about consciousness, because the fiction side of thing, like the story just didn't really, it didn't grab me in the way I thought it would, and I just got bored for most of the book, and it's definitely a bit disappointing because everyone on the internet seems to think that this is one of the best sci-fi books ever, but yeah, I didn't like it, unfortunately. Oh yeah, next I read a sequel actually. I read Nona the Ninth by Tamsyn Moore, or yeah, however you pronounce the name. I'm terrible at pronouncing names. The third book in the Gideon, the Locked Tomb series. Oh, this is my favorite of the series so far. I think it's very different. Like the tone is very different because the main character is very different compared to the previous two. The main character here is a lot more. How do I say it? It's a lot more. She's a lot more like happy-go-lucky. I guess she's not depressed nor like weird in any way really, unlike the previous two protagonists. But yeah, I guess that part of the story is probably one of my favorites. Like it's just it feels so mundane, but it feels so like compelling at the same time. It's just a story about some kids in school, and yeah, I liked it, and I like the other parts of it as well. Even though some of it still get a bit too confusing to me, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. Um, Next, oh yeah, I read a an arc from Nat Galley. It was the Monstrous vs. Mai by Van Hong. Van Hong. Yeah, again, I'm terrible at pronouncing names, but this is a historical fantasy or historical urban fantasy or magical realism, whatever you want to call it. Story about a group of girls who are struggling and they basically find magic, but magic has cost, and the cost can be a bit much. And yeah, I'm sure you know where that would go. It's not the most like, it's not the most unique premise, but I kind of liked it still because of the characters. The characters are interesting. I think the writing style is a bit, like juvenile, I guess you could say. It's not the most like well written book I've ever read, but I still liked it. Though among other arcs that I received from Nat Galley, it's not my favorite, but it's not my least favorite either. So it's fine, I guess. Oh yeah, yeah. Wait. I read a book from Lee Mandelo. This is actually another novella. Wow, I read more novella than I thought. More novellas than I thought. It's called The Woods All Black. It's a historical fantasy horror with a trans main character, and yeah, I've never read anything like that, and ooh, it was a lot. I don't know what I think about it. I think I like this more than the other Lee Mandelo book that I read, which was Summer Suns. I think I like this more because it's shorter and it contains more. I feel like than that full-on novel. But yeah, I don't think this is gonna be one of those books that everyone will like. I think a lot of people will not like this book. um, but I think I liked it. I don't know. It's a bit weird. But this one though, the last book that I have here. So this is like one of my most like highly anticipated books, and it's Christopher Ruocchio's Disquiet Guts, the sixth book in the Sun Eater series. It was great. It was like 700 pages, and in my previous video I thought I would finish it in like a week at least, and it turns out I finished it in like 3 or 4 days. So it was good, but again, I think it's not my favorite Sun Eater books, and I think my favorite is still what's it called? The one with the woman in the cover. I forgot the title. But yeah, it's that one with the red like colors and stuff. That one is my favorite. But this is still pretty good. I think this is like the penultimate book, if I'm not mistaken, and or maybe there's two more. I don't remember, but yeah, I really like this one. If you enjoyed the series until the fifth book, then there's literally no reason to not pick this one up. Like I can't really say much more because of spoilers and stuff, but yeah, you're most likely gonna like it if you already liked the previous books in the series. Okay, so those are all the books that I read. I think I'm gonna show like the book that I'm currently reading because that's what I did last month with the Disquiet Guts. But yeah, so right now I'm reading this book, Alien Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So far, this reminds me of the show, like the cartoon from a few months ago, which what was it called? Scavenger's Reign. Yeah, that's it. And it reminds me of that show a lot, and I love that show. So far, this has been really good. I can't wait to finish it, and yeah, maybe it'll be my new favorite Adrian Tchaikovsky. Who knows? But yeah. Anyways, that's all from me. Hope you enjoyed, and if you do, feel free to leave a like and subscribe as always. Yeah, thanks for watching.